Well, hi, folks, and welcome to this CCAD Knows Retail. I'm Jennifer Schlueter. I'm Dean of Grad Studies at Columbus College of Art and Design, a nonprofit art and design college that has been a creative force within Central Ohio for 140 plus years. I want to welcome you to today's event, part of the CCAD Knows Retail webinar series, featuring industry leaders who share their insight about the retail landscape and what's on its horizon. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to introduce our speakers, and I'll share a few housekeeping notes. So first, we're recording today's talk so that CCAD can share it on our website for those who aren't able to join us today. This event is in a webinar format, which we're all super familiar with at this moment in time. So all lines are muted and videos are off other than for the speakers, and they will be able to answer your questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A function throughout the discussion to submit them, or use the chat function to do the same thing. We have got a really exciting conversation set for today. So let me introduce our conversationalists first. Kathy Tedorski has over 25 years of experience in the world of retail design and has played an active part in the ongoing evolution in recent decades. Formerly trained in graphic design, Tedorski's introduction to retail design came with Columbus-based RPA, Retail Planning Associates, later to be acquired by Fitch, and she went on to collaborate with many of the industry's premier retail design agencies in Ohio, including Design Forum, FRCH, Schutt-Gerdemann, and eventually Landor and Fitch. For 9 years, she directed a multi-studio 24/7 global design team for Dell, part of our conversation today, and that was one of Landor and Fitch's largest clients, for whom she orchestrated in-store retail programs across multiple channels. As one of Fitch's longest tenured leaders, she has led a variety of teams focusing on global rollout programs, strategic innovation, and elevated thinking to transform clients' brands, to move them beyond relevant with new ways to serve and delight customers. Her client roster crosses categories and industries with blue chip clients such as Dell, Hilton, M&M Mars, Walmart, Microsoft, Sherwin-Williams, Enterprise, Dick's Sporting Goods, Sleep Number, Bath & Body Works, Scott's, TJ Maxx, Fresh Express, and Lowe's. Kathy is joined by Cecilia Eklund. Cecilia has over 30 years of industry experience, with 10 of those in retail. She started her career in finance after earning an MBA in strategy and finance. And when Dell made a move to enter the retail space, she was asked to help create a launch plan to support, which started with designing packaging for printers. And that is where her love of retail started. Over the 10 plus years, she managed the agency relationships, drove Dell's retail brand identity, designed and implemented activations in all tiers of retail, and designed award-winning stores globally. In addition, she owned Dell's global annual retail event, where retailers from 10 plus countries learned about product, trends in retail, and where to walk through examples of how to bring products to life and drive in-store engagement. Welcome, Kathy and Cecilia. I can't wait to hear what you chat about today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks for that lovely introduction. Cecilia, thanks for being here with us today. I'm excited to have you. I think, with all the time that we work together, and now we're both kind of doing other things. I'm still at LNF and you're doing new things, but we used to talk every day on the phone, multiple times a day. So it's great to see your face, and I enjoy having this kind of almost, I feel like this is going to be kind of a post-mortem of what a retained for client kind of is, if that's okay. And I'll start off by saying, because we have some, new people that are entering this, this realm, and they're probably wondering what a retainer or client is. So basically, I'd say that it's an agreement, between two companies, Dell in this case, a very large company that didn't have a whole lot of retail presence. And so you guys kind of brought Landor Fitch on to be your agency of record. Now we've been engaged with you guys since, I'm going to say you guys because you'll always be a Dell person to me. Since 2008, which is a long time. And we are still engaged with Dell to this day, which I'm so grateful for, because it's such a wonderful piece of our work that we do at Landor and Fitch. So basically your Dell pays Fitch, Landor and Fitch, to, this X many of dollars per year or quarter, if you want to split it up that way, in order to get kind of a team of designers, kind of on hand when they need them. And you guys kept us busy every second of when I was engaged with that. So that's the general gist of it, right? What would you say? Did I miss anything on that?
Well, I would say one of the really great things, right, about having access to you guys 24/7, basically, is that we really viewed you guys as our industry experts, right? And especially you talked about when we were new into the industry, you guys have known retail a lot longer than Dell has, and so part of the beauty of having that relationship is that we could lean in really heavy on you guys for your expertise on, oh, you guys forgot to think about this and go think about that. And really bring, some great ideas and help us put some process in place when we really didn't have it. Right. And so that's part of the beauty of having that type of relationship. And so I would just, add that to it.
Yeah. It was always interesting when we would talk collectively among agencies, even about, all the different parts of the business. And constantly we would say, if we were in a Best Buy, that the sales were going to go to Best Buy, not to Dell.com. And that's was a big piece of knowledge I thought that we brought to the table, that Dell always kind of, because you were so used to online sales before even online sales were a thing, right? That's where you guys started. So in order to give, the retailers their foot forward, that was a big learning curve, I think.
It definitely was. And you guys, helped us get through a lot of our own internal challenges, right? As, to your point about how we really viewed retail, and helped us think about, how do you coexist, right? And so how do you not totally, because we weren't ever going to totally draw people away from online. And then, but how do you really sort of marry the two together? And how do you really drive an environment where people can look online, but really go to the store to learn, right? And touch and feel and learn. And, how do you really drive those really key parts of your activation in the store so that even if they end up not buying it while they're in the store, they still buy Dell, whether it's in that store or they go back to Dell.com.
Right. And actually, when I think about it now, it's been an interesting time period that we've moved through since 2008, when online sales weren't as huge as they are, as they've become over the past 13 years. I mean, it's really evolved. And so, for a moment, we were thinking, is retail still relevant? Well, I do believe that it is. I do believe, like you just said, people need to touch and feel kind of the product and really experience it. So I think what we say, Landor Fitch, is that we are experiential design as well as just regular old retail. So I was thinking, where we might take this. Why is a retainer good for, an agency such as Landor Fitch and Dell, as it were? And I think from an agency in particular, it creates kind of a structured plan for us. I mean, it kind of gives us, some stability. And sometimes the design industry is a bit volatile. And I think that always kind of, we always had that to lean back on. You guys always kept us busy. We're always on our toes with a company such as Dell behind us. And then it also kind of gives us a growth pattern. And, we started with North America only. We were helping, I think our first project was a back to school end cap at a Staples, and what that looked like. And then it grew from there. And we were fortunate enough to start working with you and the global team to kind of expand upon not just North America, but South America, Asia, India, China, what that looked like in many different realms. So it just grew from there. And I think it was, for me personally, it was a great growing experience. For the company, it was a great, it's been our bread and butter and wonderful partnership. And, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, clearly you guys helped attribute to our success, right, when we were there. One of the other benefits of the retainer is that, I know it provided some stability for you guys, but it also gave us the flexibility to ebb and tide between, okay, we're going to go plan and we're going to go drive innovation and strategy. And then we'll be like, whoa, all of a sudden we got a ton of requests. And so we're going to pull back on strategy and we're going to swizzle a bit and pivot and go focus on, let's go design the next best, whatever it was going to be, right? And so since we had that retainer in place, we weren't constantly having to rewrite scopes of work. We were just giving briefs and we didn't have to go back through all of like the internal processes to get a new scope of work done and sent out and all of that. And so it really allowed us to flex and to ebb and tide as we needed to. I think without that retainer in place, we would have had a lot harder time pivoting on some of those assignments, right? And so, as we got in things, whatever it may have been, like all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we have to go solve how we're going to go enter the market in the Netherlands or something, right? Versus, what's the next thing we're going to go do for engagement? It gave us that flexibility to really pivot our work. And I think that that was huge in the success for both of us, right? For our retainer. So that to me is just so key, especially in some place like Dell, where it does take a lot of paper pushing to go do like, oh, well, we have this new idea and we're going to go get somebody to quote on it, right? And then it's like, then you got to get procurement involved and they have to review your thing. And then they're going to tell you, you got to bid it out to 3 companies at the same time. Then you have to go through a review process with them before you can award the business, et cetera, et cetera. So it really just helped us stay much more focused on what we needed to do and not be consumed with some of the, I'm going to go ahead and say bureaucracy, right? That a lot of large companies has when you go through sort of these procurement processes, right, on requesting quotes. So,
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I do also think, what's interesting is the relationships that were formed because of it. I mean, I know, like I said before, when we're always dealing with a bunch of different kind of teams, so each of the regions had their own requests, and I know we were in lockstep a lot of times, like trying to convince the North American region that this is what we're doing on a global scale and how that filters down into each of the regions and why it's right for them. But it was our relationships that we had with the North American team and with you being part of the global team, and then also the other agencies. So what was the campaign for the holidays say, and how that filtered into our work. And it was all kind of ever flowing. And I always kind of appreciated the fact that you guys helped us navigate that, because I find the relationships that you forge within these companies to be extremely important, which, the more friends you can make along the way, or colleagues or whatever, just helps in the end, because we're all trying towards one goal, if you will.
Yeah, and it was interesting, right? Because when we first started down the path, I would say we didn't have those relationships, even on our side internally at Dell, right? Because we were sort of in violent agreement that we were changing our revenue stream from one bucket to another. So it took us a while, right? It took us some learning for sure to figure out that really the best way to be efficient about it was to have our agencies that handle both retail and direct be, in constant communication, right? And it took us a while to get there for sure. Like we had some definite growing pains along the way, but once we got there, everybody really started to see the benefit of, one, just the consistency then that we can go drive across all markets, but also two, how we could help shorten the life cycle for creating the marketing assets we needed to go to market, because we weren't having to have our retail experience lag behind what we were doing on the direct side by 6 or 8 weeks or 10 like we originally had, because before within Dell, where you've got multiple channels like that, we would wait for the main channel to lock, and then we would kick off our process on the retail side. And by bringing everybody together to have a seat at the table, it helped us go live at the same time, for all intents and purposes. I mean, we would get a little off date based on when floor sets were done, but from a planning perspective, we were ready to pull the trigger and go live across all channels at the same time, which is a beautiful thing for brand consistency. And so, but it did take us a while to get there.
It did. We always thought retail was kind of the, the redheaded stepchild, if you will. That's the one that we're like, oh yeah, there's the retail guys again. So the smallest piece of the puzzle, but I think, if that was one of the downsides, it was also one of the upsides, because it made us a little bit more nimble. It made us a little bit, more scrappy. We had maybe less of the dollars, but we had to kind of go make it work, and we had to get creative with our kind of solutions on how we attack these kinds of problems, or how we could at least move forward with them.
Right. So there were lots of conversations that happened from many places as we were planning activations and stuff along the way. I know Kathy probably fondly remembers talking to me while I was riding the teacups at Disney with my kids, and things like that. But that again is sort of one of the great benefits of when you have these longer term relationships, and where everybody has that comfort level of just being like, I really have to talk to you right now, right? We need to solve this. And it may not take much of your time, but I just really need to have that quick conversation with you. And so again, I really view that as one of the great benefits of having these longer, more in-depth relationships. And I mean, I can tell you now that I've sort of, we talked about, I'm no longer at Dell, so I'm 1 year into a new role. And it is very different because I've left, and we no longer have a retained contract for agencies. And so it is a very different relationship now that I'm walking through in terms of like communication flow and availability. And so just a lot of the stuff that I grew to think that was just second nature and it was just always going to happen. It's been eye-opening for me to go back to the beginning, to where you're having to redo everything every single time, right? Because you don't have that knowledge base either that's transferring from project to project, and those relationships already formed, to where you can do the quick reach out and be like, wait, what do you mean, why'd you say that, or whatever it may be, or just the quick one-off of, have you thought about this? Because now I'm back to a relationship where it's like, here's your very defined scope, and we're not going to talk about anything that's not within the scope, so it doesn't bleed over and help influence other things that we're doing. So so now I kind of feel like I'm back to square zero, and so it has been it's been a little eye-opening for me, because since we've had the relationship for so long, I've gotten really used to, that's just how things worked, right? And so being back at ground zero on the other side again, it's been like, wow, we got to quickly figure this out and figure out how to get back to something that has a lot more stability, and to where we can keep tribal knowledge around.
Right.
So,
I think is also a little bit of the yin and the yang of it, as well as that, you have a team, and I think you said earlier, what we become kind of the subject matter experts in the field. And sometimes, a lot of times we had Dell people coming to asking for your assets, your logos. Hey, Kathy, can you throw me my logo of my company? Stuff like that. Which is great, because, we're kind of working on the same thing every day. With that, I think the team sometimes gets a little bit burnout doing the same thing. And, the interesting thing from, creative leadership position was we always had to keep pushing. What I liked about this relationship was, again, it had many tentacles. We didn't just we did different retail activations globally, right? So in China and India, we were building stores, but in the US, we were building shop in shops, or just whatever you see on the desk in a Best Buy or a Staples. So the variety of in-store executions were vastly different, but then also we were doing events for you guys. That was the teacup, the very fast turn retail March retail event that we did in Austin every year, which always came down, no matter how much time we started with, always came down to the last minute. And you were gracious enough to take phone calls, whether you were at Target or on the teacups, and that's just how our cadence worked, and that's how we got it done. But we had a lot of good things to show, I think, for all that time spent together.
We did. And then also over time, right, we also started to get more focused on online as well, right? So with how do we build out good brand presence online? So it was, again, how do you extend those touch points so that they're cohesive and they look like they're meant to go together, and so part of that was stuff none of us never even really envisioned, right, when we first started on the retail path.
Right.
And so, it was great to watch us kind of grow through the digital side of it as well, where, we leaned into you guys, quite honestly, to learn a lot. And, and as far as, like, how do you be more successful on the digital side as well? And so, just another, great way that we all kind of learned and grew together through that.
Yeah,
But
for sure. We always talk about at Landor Fitch, we talk about the physical, the human, and the digital aspects of it, but that digital aspect was, of course, it's ever evolving as we go. So always a challenge. I think if we start to talk about some of our favorite projects that we worked on, the one that always stands out to me is the innovation pipeline that we did, where we did kind of a 24-hour studio and threw ideas around, and then we went to sell them to the entire global region. And I think that was always a lot of fun. I enjoyed engaging with all the different regions and what they needed, and these just outlying, exciting ideas that, could really help bolster Dell in their markets. So whether it was really kind of out there idea, or it was just a very, this is just what we need to keep in within, the times, then those were all part of that, I think. And, that was kind of a cerebral exercise, a big brainstorm exercise. But then we also did, that Microsoft flagship that we did was intense, but very good results in the end. So I don't know, what were some of your favorite projects we worked on together?
well, so one of my favorite ones is when we started standing up the Best Buy store in stores, right? And talk about a different experience, like being there for an overnight set, and then you run and get as much done as you can overnight, then you stop because the store opens, and then you run again hard fast the next night, to try to get it done. That was just for me personally, a great learning experience for all of us, right? Because I don't think our team had been as involved in one of those types of setups.
Right.
Of course, I completely adored the Microsoft store we did. It was fantastic. And that's where, we also got to experiment in that store on how do you do things like plan ahead for things like updates to the store. And that's where we tried some new things like, well, instead of doing, print on vinyl graphics, what if we did, magnetic? And so then you're not rebuilding every time. And where we got to test out some different table mats and table surfaces and different stuff like that. So it was kind of fun, right? Because we got to sort of have our own little test bed of what worked and what didn't work. And that was probably the first time we really thought about, you're standing up a store or an activation that's going to be here for a long time. How do you make sure that you're planning for the future to be able to quickly refresh and update it? So that was one of my favorites. And then, every year, the retail event, oh my gosh, I don't know how that couldn't be our favorites. I mean, that's where we really tried some new and exciting things, from like, how do you do motion activated, engagements, how do you do different lighting? I mean, just so many cool different things that we tested out at those types of events. And And it was always interesting to watch the retailers come through and along with the regional teams and to see what really resonated with the retailers themselves as well. Because a lot of times we would get also different feedback, right, from the retailer themselves versus what we would hear from a regional team. And so some of that was a great way of being able to showcase stuff and helping us get over some hurdles internally at Dell even, because the retailers would be like, this is amazing. And the regional teams would be like, this is too hard to go do. But then once you got the retailers on board and they're like, we want to see this in our store at this time, then all of a sudden people start lining up behind these really great sort of out of the box ideas that we were trying to get the teams to bite on internally.
Right.
And so I think that really helped us move the needle in terms of some of the engagement exercises we were able to go drive in stores.
Right.
So those were some of my favorite ones where we could really feel like where we all learned and where we were really changing something, you know,
Right.
in terms of what we were bringing to market.
Yeah, it allowed us to kind of test things as we went a little bit. Which, you know, if you have one specific brief, you might not get there, but if you're kind of doing things on, you know, an ongoing basis, then it becomes your test store, and it's really important. It helps everything evolve. Plus, it was always on my birthday, so I spent every birthday with you for a good 7 years.
Yep.
I was just thinking about what are some of the key takeaways, and I think you said it. You touched on this earlier. I think one of the biggest things is to start with a great brief. Seems so simple, not always so simple, but I think that kind of gets everybody accountable for what is expected, and it's really important, and it's hard to nail, don't you think?
I think a great brief is really hard to get. It took us a lot of tries before we finally got there. And it is also amazing, depending on what type of activation or what you're going to go try to do, right? Like the brief has to really change from each one. We tried to do something very standardized and learned quickly that we were missing stuff and just creating a lot of more churn for everybody involved, you know, so that, you know, having a great brief is really, you know, the key to making sure everybody's aligned on expectations, and then also really helping to reduce the churn, right? So I think it's super important, and I think we learned the hard way on that. We spent a lot of, you know, there were many projects where we just went round and round and round for a long time while we all tried to get aligned on it. And then as part of that brief too, one of the things we also really learned is that for us, for our internal stakeholders as well, it was really important to make sure that we were clear on expectations on our side from our internal stakeholders as well before we started down that path, so that we wouldn't end up with, like, here's this great design and we're sending it through our last step of internal approvals, and we would be like, get tripped up because people are like, well, I was expecting this, or where's that, or why didn't you do this? And so we also learned that on the internal side for Dell, it was also just as important to make sure that everybody was aligned on that brief, especially on large projects, right? So if we're going to go build a new store, everybody needed to be aligned on expectations on our side, not just from the retail marketing team, but from our end users within Dell. And so I think we kind of learned the hard way on that. But as we went, we continued to morph our briefs. And it certainly was key in making sure that, you know, one, we weren't churning, which also just ate up our agency retainer dollars, right? And so we really needed to be efficient because we had a lot of stuff to get done.
Yeah, yes, we did. I think also that finding the right cadence to the amount of like communication and whatnot was also important. I mean, we've got our brief and we need time to kind of go off and, you know, ideate and come up with some great stuff, but making sure that we have regular check-ins when we need them and who needs to be there and what. I mean, I feel like every time, you know, if you guys were to have an organizational shift and somebody else kind of came to lead the group. Their focus kind of shifted a little bit too. So those are kind of two different things, but everybody leads kind of a different way. And I think that finding that niche for each time we go either through a project or, with a different group, that was always really important as well.
Yeah, I think it was really important to understand everybody's hot buttons for sure.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Mine was just make sure Cecilia had her coffee first.
Yeah. Still true today.
And could, read her brief anywhere or get her deck anywhere you were. You're a very multitasking person, which I love about you. But yeah. And then, I also think about as the team grows and evolves, about the brand trust and the brand advocates that we all become for you. It's almost like we are, an extension of the Dell team, because these people on the retained accounts tend to be there for a few years. It's hard to kind of jump in and out with such a complex client such as Dell. I mean, there's just many different parts. Like, again, if we're talking about global and regional and what they do in a Best Buy compared to a Costco or whatever, I mean, there's just a lot of different nuances. And I love that our team has always become, we call them the Dellians in Landor and Fitch. And I think it just streamlines our process internally in what we have to offer you guys as well.
Definitely. Again, back to that sort of tribal knowledge, right? So there's a lot to be said for that.
There is. It's very important. But then, it's also crazy because along the way, we would also we're often doing brainstorm sessions with other people in our organization just to get new ideas, like to switch and turn. And, the team will be like, we already tried that. Like, that's okay. Let's just get new ideas out there. That's what a good brainstorm session will do. But it's important in order, I think, to keep the relationship alive and keep us fresh in one business. But again, bringing new ideas to the table.
I also think what we learned too along the way, right, through that innovation pipeline, is that just because something didn't happen like that year or whatever, that we would go back to some of the ideas and just refresh them a little bit and repackage them. And then maybe it was the right time and right place for us to, go down that journey to go see if it was something we could do. So a lot of the stuff, as you guys went through the innovation pipeline work, I think it was very forward thinking. We weren't just quite ready for it yet. And so, if you think through some of the stuff, that we ultimately ended up doing, it may have been proposed a year before or 2 years before in that innovation journey work. And, it was finally just, we were at the right place and right time to go make something like that happen. So it was also, interesting where, like I said, it wasn't, I think you guys may have sometimes felt like we were recycling ideas, but I think we finally just found the right time and place to make an idea work, So I think, some of the stuff you look like we did, things like, like somebody, a sales associate always available in the store, right? A virtual sales associate is, available in the store. And while it was a super innovative idea, we just weren't ready for it at that time, right? And I think because we were scared, we were like going, oh my gosh, the connectivity in the stores isn't that great. I don't know how we would ever pull this off. Yeah. But then as the stores were actually online all the time, right? And they had internet accessibility, then all of a sudden we were like, wait, what was that idea Fitch did like a while back? And again, had we not been on a retained contract, we would have never had visibility to, these, because I think usually through the innovation exercises, you guys would come forward with like 8 to 12 new ideas. And without that continuity there, we wouldn't have been able to go, wait, there was that thing we talked about before. Now let's go look at that, right? And so, I loved some of those as we, got to bring some of those to life, even though they didn't happen we were all super excited about them like maybe a year before, right? But
Yeah.
finally their day came, right? Their
Right.
day in the sun came. So
Right. It's also interesting how we could pivot it to benefit different parts of your business, right? So if we were pitching it for Dell retail, but really we found out a year later that it worked for your small business consumer, or the gaming industry, Alienware could benefit from this bit of an idea. And so we just pivot and kind of use it over there. And I think it was interesting to see how they kind of were interwoven a bit and how we work those things out.
yep.
So I think that's the gist of it. I don't know if anyone has any questions, or Jennifer, if you have any
Sure.
questions for us.
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks very much for a very enlightening conversation. I think we are all like honorary Dellians right now. I'm going to remember forever. So yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions to get us started. And then, yeah, please feel free, folks, to use the Q&A in the chat function if you want to get some inside scoop on some of this stuff. I'm thinking about what you were just talking about with the innovation pipeline and the ways that maybe Dell was or wasn't ready for certain ideas at certain phases, but has the benefit of the long relationship to come back to or to use in other ways. And I'm wondering, for the design firm end of things here, how do you balance the need or the desire to sort of advocate for a route with sort of just offering some potentials, and then sort of being patient around what may be the right move at what time for the firm?
No. Well, yeah, it's hard because sometimes we get super excited about certain ideas and we're like, what do you mean? It's not gonna, that kind of thing. But I think that is something I cherish now, is the long haul, and the fact that we could kind of not recycle, but like bring these ideas forward when they made sense. So, if they weren't ready for them, it's always a little disappointing, because you wanna push and push and push. But at the same time, if you kind of keep those in the bank, it's something that we have in our queue for what comes the next time around. So if we go forward with an idea and it just gets a little bit watered down, I mean, that's kind of to be expected, because our job is to really push. But eventually we'll bring those ideas back and we will get them at some point, or at least we'll try. I mean, that's what we do.
That makes sense. Is that sort of a similar sense from your end of things, Cecilia, that there maybe were sort of ideas that emerged in your work with Kathy that felt like this could be an exciting route, but you needed to sort of negotiate internally to get Dell to a place where they felt ready for it?
Absolutely, right? So especially as, some of the ideas, we wanted to go out and go do something big and new and have it, have a lot of reach. But, it's hard when you have so many different types of retail activations, right? And so many different types of requirements, depending on if you were, like initially we were in Walmart, and think about like what you would do at a Walmart versus the shopper at like a micro center, or somebody that's just going, I have no idea what I'm doing, versus somebody that like wants to do their own, right? And so we definitely had challenges in doing that, and a lot of it too was people being gun shy in terms of like how much it was going to cost and how hard is it to implement, right? And so we really had to start thinking about, as Fitch brought forward all these different ones, or different ideas, how could we frame them up to try to get better buy-in from our regional partners in terms of wanting to move forward with them, right? And so we did try different things, in terms of how do you present it, and how do you really put a dollar value on it, and because everybody wants to have like a good ROI, and you want to see your activations and your engagements going up, right? And ultimately your sales going up. And so we did go through a lot of iterations in trying to get people to buy in. So, and sometimes we would get disappointed too, because we would be like, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread. And then your regional or your internal stakeholders would be like, no, just straight up no. You're like going, but don't you understand? We're going to be able to go do all this cool stuff. No. Okay, thanks. So,
Oh, that makes sense. Well, let me ask you this. So Cecilia, it sounds like where you are now, there's a sort of in-house team that you're working with, and you sort of alluded in the early phases of the conversation to the ways that working with a sort of permanent design team is really different than working with a retained organization. Could you say a little bit more about the sort of distinctions that you feel as you operate in that way?
absolutely. And so part of it is, so I've gone from a very huge company to a startup, right? And so I was actually like employee 82 a year ago, and now we're at 175 employees a year later. And part of that, we've leaned in on like one agency that manages our website, which is totally disconnected from what we say in social, which is also very different from when we're designing assets and doing use cases and things like that. How we're talking to our customers and face to face, and we don't get that consistent sort of brand voice because we're working with like 2 or 3 different agencies and we're really small, right? And so you don't get that consistency. And as we're doing things like launching like some new virtual engagements and things like that, and talking about moving into retail, like none of these agencies have that expertise. And so it is also hard because, our agencies, as we're rebranding ourselves right now, you've got like a little niche of people that understand what we're doing, and it's not permeating across the organization, and it's not transferring between like our agency that does our web development with our agency that does all of my event activations. And so when they're designing a new event activation for me, for example, I'm like, but no, that's not relevant to our brand, right? And even though we'll include it in the brief, they don't have that sort of working knowledge still, right, of what we're trying to achieve, and it's not coming forward. It's not resonating in what they're designing for us, and it's because because we're so fragmented. It is really hard. And like I said, I realize now how fortunate I was when I was at Dell, and we had this amazing relationship, and I could be like, Kathy, I need this and this and this, and and because there is all that knowledge and that broad base of people, it would always come back cohesive, right? Even if it touched on different offices within Fitch, it could have been the Hong Kong office, the London office, and the Columbus office all working together. It would always be cohesive. And even though they all had their own strengths. And like what I'm working with now is that it's completely different agencies, and there is no cross-agency communication happening today. And so it is much harder, and it's like going, wow, I never realized how good I had it before,
I think you guys also set up for us as well what we called Team Dell, which was definitely different agencies like Cecilia was talking about, but we were all kind of brought together to work together. So when we were working with YNR or VML, VML, whether they were doing digital or advertising or whatever, they forced us in a room and made us all kind of work together, which we were happy to do because it made it a better outcome across the board in terms of the same voice,
Yeah, perfect sense. Well, listen, I want to say thank you very much to both of you. This was a delight to get to see 2 powerful women who had a long-term relationship chat about to break it down for us like this is a real privilege. And someday I hope to have a meeting on the teacups at as well.
I want to be on the teacups this time and not on the phone.
I love it. Thank you both for joining us today. Thanks to everybody who is here with us. Before we go, I just want to say a couple of things. If this talk resonated with you and you want to learn more, you can always take a look at CCAD's MPS and retail design. I've just dropped a link here in the chat to that, which was designed by leaders like Kathy, who are part of its advisory board for this new degree program that starts in January of 2022. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to share it with a friend who wasn't able to attend, there'll be a recording available on that website in the coming days. Thank you both so much. And thank you to everyone who was here with us today. It was a delight.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.